was something that overcome magic when he was able to turn the staff into a snake. Then when you look at the miracles of Isa alayhi salam, what you find that during his time, the Roman Empire were masters of medicine. So the miracles that were given to Isa alayhi salam were very much related to medicine. The fact that he was born without a father. The fact that he was able to bring the dead back to life, bi-idhnillah. And he was able to turn a clay item into a bird. So then this begs the question that what was the expertise during the time of the Prophet ﷺ's coming? And interestingly enough, we find that the Arabs really were not special in terms of the international scene. Even historically, the ancient historian Herodotus, he said that there was nothing that any empire was interested in the Arabs, which is the reason that they never even tried conquering it. The Romans and Persians, they had no interest in the Arabian Empire, in the Arabian Peninsula, because they had nothing to offer. At that time, they didn't know anything about oil, which would be discovered later. And Alexander the Great, it said that he brought his armies to the gates of the Arabian Peninsula, and then he told his armies to turn back, because the Arabian Peninsula had nothing to offer but desert and heat. But despite all of this, the one expertise that the Arabs had during the time of the Prophet ﷺ was their eloquence. They were known for their incredible eloquence, which is why they would have poetry competitions every single year, and whichever poets came up with the best poems, they would hang those poems onto the Kaaba, which is why they were known as mu'allaqat, those items that are hanged. So when the Prophet ﷺ was given his miracle, it was going to be one that has to do with eloquence. And this is why even the best poets amongst the Arabs were unable to emulate what the Quran was bringing. And the most famous incident of this is that of Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira. Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, he was known to be the Shakespeare of the Quraysh. And so he once heard about the Quran, he once heard the recitation, and just naturally, this man is a disbeliever. In fact, he is one of the staunchest disbelievers. When he hears the Quran, he can't help himself, and he begins to do poetry about the Quran, in which he says, وَإِنَّ لَهُ لَحَلَاوَةً وَإِنَّ عَلَيْهِ لَطَلَاوَةً وَإِنَّهُ لَيَعْلُو وَلَا يُعْلَى. That in this recitation, there is a sweetness. In it, there is an elongated nature. And it is a recitation that overcomes and cannot be overcome. Now, when he made this statement, the other enemies of the Prophet ﷺ became concerned, because if word spreads around that Walid ibn al-Mughira has praised the Quran, then that's going to be a problem for them. People will begin to accept Islam. So then Abu Jahl pays a visit to Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, and this is a secret visit, and he tells him that you have to retract your statement. You have to criticize the Quran, so that people don't start saying that Al-Walid has become Muslim. So then Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, he finds himself alone in his house, thinking about how he is going to criticize the Quran. And he is pacing back and forth from one side of the room to the other side, stressed out, sweating, concerned, thinking, what is he going to say about this book, when he knows that it is far superior to anything that he could come up with. And subhanAllah, you think to yourself, how does anyone know that this occurred when he was all alone? Who was there to narrate it? Allah narrates it for us in the Quran. Allah gives us a psychological profile of Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira during this time when he says, إِنَّهُ فَكَّرَ وَقَدَّرَ فَقُتِلَ كَيْفَ قَدَّرَ ثُمَّ قُتِلَ كَيْفَ قَدَّرَ ثُمَّ نَظَرَ ثُمَّ عَبَسَ وَبَسَرَ ثُمَّ أَدْبَرَ وَاسْتَكْبَرَ. That he was pacing back and forth. It's describing his stress that he is experiencing. And then what conclusion does he come up with? He says, فَقَالَ إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا سِحْرٌ يُؤْثَرُ. That this cannot be except speech that is magic. So the only explanation that he could come up with for the Quran is that it's magic. And this, by the way, is a praise of the Quran itself, because he has already identified that this is something beyond human capacity. So his criticism is also an indirect praise of the Quran. And so the Quran has these ayat which are known as ayatul tahaddi, the verses of challenge. And there are a total of 5 of them, and each of them is at a different level. The first one starts off with the hardest. It says it's a challenge to all human beings and jinn that bring something like the entire Quran. And no one was able to do that. Then the bar is brought lower, and it says, okay, you can't bring the entire Quran, bring at least 10 surahs like it. بِعَشْرِ سُوَرٍ. And they were unable to do that. So the bar is lowered again, and this is like someone saying, lift 100 pounds. So you can't do 100 pounds? All right, at least do 50. At least do 20. The bar is getting lowered. At least bring 10 surahs like it. They're not able to, so at least bring 1 surah like it. And Allah seals the deal by saying, فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا وَلَن تَفْعَلُوا. And if you do not, and you will certainly not, فَاتَّقُوا النَّارِ. Then fear the punishment. Fear the hellfire. So the reason I'm mentioning all of this is because we are in شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن, the month of Ramadan in which the Quran was revealed, in which this great miracle was revealed. And Allah, through His wisdom, He made it a miracle that is for the ears and not for the eyes. All the other miracles that the prophets had, they were for the eyes to see. But He gave the Prophet ﷺ a miracle that is for the ears to hear, for the mind and heart to enjoy. Why? Because this is the final miracle. This is the final message. So it has to be something that could last until the end of times. So now, when we have recognized that it is a miracle, this brings upon us obligations. The more someone has seen the truth of the miracle, the more they are responsible to fulfill what the obligations are. So I just want to end off by mentioning 5 obligations that we have towards the Quran, and inshallah all of us can apply these in our lives going forward. Number 1 is qira'atul Quran, reading the Quran. Every one of us should have a routine of reading the Quran. And some of us here, maybe we have not read the Quran, maybe we have not perfected our pronunciation, maybe you haven't given enough time to that. Well then, find a teacher. Find someone in the masjid and begin to work on it. You don't need to become an expert in 1 week, but take your time and work towards becoming better in qira'atul Quran. Number 2 is hifdhul Quran, memorization of the Quran. Now everybody doesn't need to become a hafid. The Sahaba were not all huffaz, but we should all have a significant portion of the Quran memorized. Number 3 is fahmul Quran, understanding the Quran. Because reading and memorizing is not enough, but we have to take it to the next step, which is understanding the Quran. Attending classes, attending lectures which talk about the tafsir. Taking classes in which you could learn the Arabic language so that you could understand what the Imam is reciting in Taraweeh. This is fahmul Quran. Then the 4th is amalul Quran. Reading, memorizing, and understanding is not enough. It's all supposed to lead to acting upon the Quran. And this is why one of the companions, after the Prophet ﷺ had passed away, he was a senior companion. He came to one of the tabi'een, people of the next generation, and he said to this tabi'i, "Khatamtul Quran." I have completed the Quran. And the tabi'i was shocked. What do you mean you've completed the Quran? Of course, that's basic. That's nothing special. That's what everyone is supposed to do. And you're a Sahabi, so I'm not surprised you completed the Quran. And then the Sahabi said, no, you're misunderstanding. قَتَمْتُ الْقُرْآنِ بِالْأَعْمَالِ. I have completed the Quran with actions. Not just qira'ah, but actually acting upon everything. And the funny part about this is that the last commandment that he fulfilled had to do with knocking the door 3 times. And if the person doesn't open, then you leave. The problem he kept running into was that every time he would knock on the door, the person would open the door. So he was never able to fulfill this command. But then finally, the last command he fulfilled was this one. And so that's why he said, خَتَمْتُ الْقُرْآنِ بِالْأَعْمَالِ. This is number 4. And number 5, the last one is تَبْلِيغُ الْقُرْآنِ or دَعْوَةُ الْقُرْآنِ, which is spreading the Quran to your Muslims and also to non-Muslims. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً, that spread even if it is 1 verse. Oftentimes people have a misconception that if you're not a hafiz, if you're not a scholar, if you're not a mufassir, then you can't talk about the Quran. No, this is not true. You could still talk about the Quran, you could still teach the Quran as long as you stay in your limits. It's a responsibility upon every one of us to actually talk about the Quran. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us an understanding of the Quran. May He allow us to act upon this great miracle that we have been blessed with. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك جزاكم الله خير. Yes, inshallah, we'll be having class today after Dhuhr Salah, and it will be on the tafsir of Surah Al-Baqarah. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.